Good evening and aloha from the Hokulani Imaginarium here in Kaneohe, Hawaii. Let's take a look at the September sky. I'm going to talk to you about what you can see in terms of the moon and the planets in our evening sky this month. We're starting off looking to the south just after sunset. The time here in our planetarium is about 7:15, and it's already dark enough to see a couple of very bright objects here in the south. First one of those is the moon rising in the southeast. On September 1st, the moon is nearly full. In fact, the full moon properly happens on September 3rd. Each day of the month, the moon rises a little bit later in the evening. So by September 10th, the moon won't be up until after midnight, meaning that the evening sky will be nice and dark for star watching and looking at other faint objects in our sky. The new moon occurs on September 17th, and the next full moon will be early in the month of August. Now, for planets. The first one we'll talk about is in fact the brightest object you can see right now. This here is the planet Jupiter. Jupiter is the largest object orbiting our sun, and when the moon is not up, it might also be the brightest object in our night sky. As a gas giant planet, Jupiter does not have solid ground like Earth does. Instead, it's mostly atmosphere, with a tiny solid core deep inside. We're going to take a look through a simulated telescope to get a closer view here. With even just a simple telescope, you can usually see bands of light and dark clouds on the planet Jupiter. Through this close view, we can see those bands much more clearly and tell there are a few different colors of gases in them. With this view, we can also see some of Jupiter's bright companions here. These four objects are the four largest moons of Jupiter: Ganymede, Io, Europa, and Callisto. These four are among the largest moons in the solar system. 3 of them are larger than our own moon, and 1 is even bigger than the planet Mercury. They're all very interesting worlds. You can find surprises like volcanoes and oceans there. We'll talk more about them in a special video all about moons. Now Jupiter, even though it's much larger than Earth, has a daytime that is much shorter than Earth's. It only takes 10 hours for one rotation of Jupiter. That gives us astronomers a little treat. As we look at Jupiter during the 9 or 10 hours of darkness in an Earth night, we can actually see different sides of Jupiter as the planet turns. Here, I'm going to speed up time with our simulated telescope so we can see what that looks like over the course of an evening. By around 11:30, you can see the famous Great Red Spot on Jupiter facing Earth, and it turns away by about 1. And by 2 o'clock in the morning or 2:30, we lose sight of Jupiter as it sets below the horizon in the west. Looking to the south again around 10 o'clock, we see the moon has risen much higher into the sky, and of course we recognize this next bright object as Jupiter. That second bright object following Jupiter across the sky is also a planet. That is Saturn. Saturn is also a gas giant. It's the second largest object orbiting our sun, and it's a little bit of a celebrity with the beautiful rings. Let's take a look at Saturn now through our telescope. Saturn's rings are made up of lots of small bits of rock, ice, and dust. Even though they're larger across than the whole planet, those rings are only about 100 meters thick. That is to say, if the rings were the same size as a CD or a DVD, they would be much, much thinner than that disk. Saturn's rings make it distinct even if you're looking through a small telescope or even a pair of binoculars. You might have a view like this one, where you can, in good seeing conditions, make out a bit of an oblong shape to the planet. That unusual shape is what perplexed astronomers when they looked through the first telescopes for years until technology finally improved to give them a better view. With our up-close view here, we can also see some companion moons of Saturn, including this special one in particular, the somewhat orange-yellow colored moon here is Titan. Titan is the other largest moon in the solar system, in fact, second only to Jupiter's Ganymede. But what makes Titan really special is that it is the only moon in the solar system that we know of that has an atmosphere, and a rather thick atmosphere like Earth's. Unlike Earth's, however, weather on Titan is not oxygen, nitrogen, and water. Instead, Titan sees rain made up of methane gas. It's not something you'd want to be swimming in because it's also very cold. Saturn's moons also have an effect on those famous rings. Without moons, Saturn's rings would probably just be smooth and flat and same colored. Instead, we can see these bright and dark bands, as well as some texture in the rings, looking kind of like tracks on a vinyl record. That's because some of Saturn's smaller moons orbit just inside or just outside, or even in the middle of the rings. These are sometimes nicknamed shepherd moons because their gravity in orbit pushes and pulls on those particles of rock and ice and dust to keep the rings in a nice, neat shape, and some of them even clearing out spaces, which is what this dark gap in the middle of the rings is. Let's go back now to the view of our southern sky at about 10 o'clock, and we'll look for the third planet that we'll see up there tonight. It's just risen above the horizon, so we'll have to peek over here to the east a bit. And of course, we're talking about that bright reddish object there. That is our inner planet neighbor, and the fourth planet from the Sun, Mars. Let's get a closer look at Mars now, shall we? Like the other inner planets, that is, Mercury, Venus, and Earth, Mars is called a terrestrial or rocky planet. It's easily recognizable for us because of that red color, which comes from minerals in its soil, mainly iron oxide, which we would just call rust. What's it like on the surface of Mars? It's dusty and very cold. The average temperature is a negative 80 degrees Fahrenheit. What makes Mars so cold? There are two main reasons for that. First, Mars is farther from the Sun than Earth. It's about half again the distance from Earth to the Sun. So sunlight on Mars is only 45% as intense. Second reason is that Mars doesn't have a good warm coat. Like Earth, it does have an atmosphere, but Earth's air pressure at the surface is 100 times the surface pressure on Mars. That means that the insulating blanket around Mars is too thin to keep its temperature well regulated. The daytime high temperatures might be 30 or 40 degrees Fahrenheit, but at night it will get well below negative 100 degrees. That Martian day is also similar to Earth's, about 24 hours and 40 minutes long. And like Jupiter, we can see different parts of Mars's surface as we watch it rotate overnight. I'll speed up time so we can do that here. Now with this view, we can also see two of Mars's companions. It has two small moons, which are called Phobos and Deimos. Those moons are very small. In fact, they're usually too small to see with any sort of portable telescope, so we're exaggerating them a bit for ourselves. Phobos is only 12 miles across, while Deimos is even smaller, just 7.5. That means either moon is smaller than even the smallest populated Hawaiian island. Now, by 6 a.m. or so, the sun has risen, and even though Mars is high up in the sky, we're not going to be seeing very much since the sky is bright. So, thank you for watching the sky tonight with us. We hope you can go out after sunset this month and look for the moon, Jupiter, Saturn, and Mars. Ask your family and friends if they know any star names or other constellations, and try to find those together as well. Then look for our next video, and we'll talk about how to find the North Star and use it to find your location on Earth. Thanks for taking the time to sky watch with us today. Until next time, aloha and good night.